John F. Kennedy. The limousine slows near Dealey Plaza. Crowds press against the curb. The president is exposed in an open car. Arms wave. Cameras click. Then sharp cracks split the air. On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy, 46, rode through downtown Dallas, Texas. He was the 35th President of the United States, elected on youth and Cold War resolve. Records show the motorcade route had been published in advance. The open-top Lincoln Continental moved past the Texas School Book Depository. Texas Governor John Connally sat ahead of him. Witnesses later recalled hearing 3 shots. Some said more. Authorities determined Lee Harvey Oswald fired from a 6th-floor window. Accounts vary on the sequence of impacts. The first bullet missed. Another struck Kennedy in the upper back and exited through his throat. A final shot hit his head. Connally collapsed beside him. Secret Service agent Clint Hill ran from the follow-up car. He climbed onto the trunk as the limousine accelerated toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors attempted resuscitation. Official reports confirmed massive head trauma. A shot rang out. Kennedy jerked forward. Blood marked the rear seat. The crowd fell silent. Doctors stopped efforts. It was over in minutes. At 1 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in aboard Air Force One. The body was placed in a bronze casket and flown to Washington. One nurse later said she felt numb. Oswald was arrested within hours in a nearby theater. 2 days later, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot Oswald during a jail transfer broadcast live. That reversal stunned authorities. The accused assassin was silenced before trial. The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone. What is documented is this: doubt persisted. Investigations continued for decades. Kennedy was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The eternal flame was lit. The motorcade ended in gunfire. The presidency changed hands that day. Abraham Lincoln. The play pauses for laughter. A man slips through the box door. A pistol is raised behind the president's head. The shot cracks across the theater. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, 56, attended a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He was the 16th President of the United States, leading the Union through Civil War. Records show General Robert E. Lee had surrendered 5 days earlier. The nation was in fragile celebration. John Wilkes Booth entered the presidential box. He was a known actor. Witnesses later recalled Booth shouting as he fired. Authorities determined he used a single-shot Derringer pistol at close range. Major Henry Rathbone attempted to stop him and was slashed. Booth leapt to the stage and escaped through the rear alley. Confusion spread instantly. Lincoln slumped forward in his chair. Mary Todd Lincoln cried out for help. Doctors in the audience rushed to the box. Official reports confirmed the wound was fatal. He was carried across 10th Street to the Peterson house and placed on a bed too small for his frame. Breathing grew shallow. The room fell still. At 7:22 a.m., April 15th, he died. He was 56 years old. War Secretary Edwin Stanton began directing containment. Telegraph lines transmitted the news nationwide. One is documented as this: Booth fled south through Maryland. Accounts vary on who aided his escape. One soldier later said he felt empty. Authorities determined Booth was cornered 12 days later in a tobacco barn near Port Royal, Virginia. He was shot during the capture. Conspirators were arrested and tried by military tribunal. 4 were executed. Lincoln once authorized wartime executions. Now his body lay under military guard. His remains were transported by funeral train to Springfield, Illinois. Public viewings drew large crowds. Official reports confirmed unprecedented mourning. The presidency transferred to Andrew Johnson. The war had ended. The assassination did not. Martin Luther King Jr. He steps onto the balcony for air. He leans over the railing. A rifle report cuts across the courtyard. He drops instantly. On April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., 39, stood outside room 306 at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the most recognized leader of the American Civil Rights Movement. Records show he was in Memphis supporting striking sanitation workers. Tensions were high after earlier protests turned violent. Reverend Ralph Abernathy was inside the room. Jesse Jackson stood below. Witnesses later recalled a loud crack from across Mulberry Street. Authorities determined the shot came from a boarding house bathroom window. Official reports confirmed the bullet struck his neck and jaw. Chaos followed. King lay on the balcony floor. Abernathy cradled his head. Blood stained the concrete. Sirens approached quickly. No one spoke. He was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. at St. Joseph's Hospital. He was 39 years old. Police secured the area and began containment. What is documented is this: a Remington rifle was recovered nearby. Accounts vary on who first saw the fleeing suspect. Authorities identified James Earl Ray as the primary suspect. One nurse later said she prayed quietly. Ray was captured 2 months later at London Heathrow Airport using a false passport. He was extradited to Tennessee under heavy guard. In March 1969, he pleaded guilty to avoid a jury trial. That reversal prevented public testimony. He later recanted, claiming conspiracy. Official investigations concluded he acted alone. Doubt persisted. King had preached nonviolence nationwide. He was killed by a single shot. His body was flown to Atlanta. A mule-drawn farm wagon carried his casket during the funeral procession. Crowds lined the streets in silence. Riots erupted in more than 100 cities after his death. Federal troops were deployed to contain unrest. Congress passed the Fair Housing Act days later. The balcony remains preserved. The gunfire ended his movement in Memphis. Robert F. Kennedy. He moves through the hotel kitchen. Supporters press close behind him. A man steps forward with a revolver. Shots explode in the narrow corridor. On June 5, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy, 42, had just claimed victory in the California Democratic primary at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He was a U.S. Senator and former Attorney General, campaigning for the presidency months after his brother's assassination. Records show he exited the embassy ballroom shortly after midnight, redirected through a pantry area toward a press conference. Campaign aide Paul Schrade walked beside him. The route was unsecured. Witnesses later recalled seeing Sirhan Bishara Sirhan standing near a steam table. Authorities determined Sirhan fired a .20 revolver at close range. Official reports confirmed Kennedy was struck multiple times. Accounts vary on the exact positioning of the shooter and victim during the struggle. Security reacted too late. A burst of gunfire echoed. Kennedy fell backward onto the floor. Trays scattered across the tiles. The room froze briefly. He lay motionless. It was over in seconds. Doctors rushed him to Good Samaritan Hospital. Surgeons operated for hours. What is documented is this: the fatal wound entered behind his right ear. He was pronounced dead at 1:44 a.m. on June 6th. He was 42 years old. Sirhan was subdued at the scene and arrested immediately. Police recovered the revolver with 8 rounds fired. Authorities determined he acted alone, though debate continued for decades. A busboy later said he felt helpless. Sirhan was convicted and sentenced to death in 1969. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment after California voided the death penalty. That reversal ensured he would remain incarcerated. Kennedy once served as the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Now federal agents guarded his body. His remains were flown to New York and displayed at St. Patrick's Cathedral. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery beside his brother. The campaign ended in a pantry. The election moved on without him. James A. Garfield. He walks through the station waiting room. A man steps from behind a pillar. 2 shots fire at close range. The president staggers but remains standing. On July 2, 1881, James A. Garfield, 49, was shot at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. He was the 20th president of the United States for months into office. Records show he was traveling to deliver a speech at Williams College. Secretary of State James G. Blaine stood beside him when the gunman approached. The attacker was Charles J. Guiteau. He claimed divine approval. Witnesses later recalled Garfield saying, "My God, what is this?" Authorities determined Guiteau fired 2 shots with a .44 caliber revolver. 1 bullet grazed Garfield's arm. The second lodged deep in his back. Accounts vary on whether immediate surgery worsened the injury. Guiteau did not flee far. He was seized on the platform. Police dragged him outside. Crowds shouted for lynching. Officers forced a path. Containment held. Garfield was carried upstairs inside the station. Doctors probed the wound with unsterilized fingers and instruments. Official reports confirmed repeated attempts to locate the bullet. Infection set in within days. He lingered for weeks. What is documented is this: Alexander Graham Bell attempted to use an early metal detector to find the bullet. The device failed, possibly due to interference from bed springs. Garfield was later transported by special train to Elberon, New Jersey, seeking sea air. One physician later admitted uncertainty. On September 19, 1881, his heart weakened. Breathing slowed noticeably. Doctor stood at the bedside. The room grew quiet. He stopped responding. He was 49 years old. Gitto was tried and convicted. He was executed by hanging in June 1882. Authorities determined he acted alone. Garfield once commanded Union troops. Now soldiers guarded his coffin. His body was transported to Cleveland for burial. Public mourning followed nationwide. Congress soon passed civil service reforms, limiting patronage. The wound did not kill immediately. The infection did. William McKinley, he stands in a receiving line. His right hand extends in greeting. A man steps forward with a wrapped hand. 2 shots fire at close range. On September 6, 1901, William McKinley, 58, was greeting visitors at the Temple of Music during the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. He was the 25th President of the United States, re-elected the previous year after leading the nation through the Spanish-American War. Records show security was minimal despite prior threats against public officials. The gunman was Leon Czolgosz. He concealed a revolver beneath a handkerchief. Witnesses later recalled McKinley swaying but remaining conscious. Authorities determined one bullet ricocheted off a button. The second entered his abdomen. Accounts vary on whether immediate surgery fully located the damage. The crowd reacted violently. Bystanders struck Czolgosz repeatedly. Secret Service agents intervened. Police forced him into custody. Containment was immediate. The president asked for calm. McKinley was transported to the Exposition Hospital inside the grounds. Doctors operated under electric light but lacked modern imaging. Official reports confirmed the bullet was not removed. Infection developed over the following days. For a week, he seemed stable. One is documented as this: on September 13th, his condition worsened rapidly. Gangrene spread internally. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt was summoned from the Adirondacks. Breathing grew faint. Family gathered quietly. The room stilled. Doctors stepped back. He stopped responding. He was 58 years old. Czolgosz confessed openly, citing anarchist beliefs. Authorities determined he acted alone. He was tried swiftly in Buffalo and sentenced to death. A nurse later said she could not forget his final words. Czolgosz was executed in the electric chair on October 29, 1901. McKinley once commanded wartime forces abroad. Now soldiers stood guard beside his coffin. His body was transported by train to Canton, Ohio, for burial. Public mourning followed nationwide. Congress expanded Secret Service protection for future presidents. The handshake ended in gunfire. The presidency passed to Roosevelt. Malcolm X, he steps toward the podium. A disturbance erupts near the stage. Gunfire breaks across the ballroom. He falls backward onto the floor. On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X, 39, was speaking at the Audubon Ballroom in Manhattan, New York City. He was a prominent black nationalist leader who had recently broken from the Nation of Islam. Records show tensions between Malcolm and former associates had intensified in the previous year. His home had been firebombed days earlier. His wife, Betty Shabazz, sat nearby. Security was limited. Witnesses later recalled a man shouting to distract the crowd. Authorities determined multiple assailants rushed forward with firearms. Official reports confirmed Malcolm X was struck numerous times at close range. Accounts vary on the exact number of shooters involved. Panic spread instantly. Shots echoed in rapid bursts. Malcolm collapsed onto the stage. Chairs overturned across the hall. Smoke hung in the air. The room fell into shock. It was over in seconds. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. He was 39 years old. Police arrested Talmadge Hayer at the scene after he was beaten by bystanders. Two other men, Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson, were later convicted. One is documented as this: decades later. Convictions were vacated after prosecutorial review cited withheld evidence. That reversal renewed scrutiny of the original investigation. One witness later said he could not move. Authorities long maintained the killing was carried out by Nation of Islam members. Official investigations acknowledged security failures and possible surveillance gaps. Public reaction was immediate and divided. Some mourned openly. Others remained silent. Malcolm had once condemned his former organization publicly. Now his body lay under police guard. His funeral in Harlem drew thousands. He was buried at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. The speech never resumed. The gunfire ended it there. Huey long he strides through the marble corridor. Voices echo beneath the high ceiling. A man steps forward and fires. The senator stumbles against a pillar. On September 8, 1935, Huey Long, 42, was shot inside the Louisiana state capitol in Baton Rouge. He was a U.S. senator and former governor, known nationally for his Share Our Wealth program. Records show he had consolidated political control across Louisiana, drawing fierce opposition. The gunman was Dr. Carl Weiss. He approached without warning. Witnesses later recalled a brief confrontation before the shot. Authorities determined Weiss fired at close range with a small caliber pistol. Accounts vary on whether Long's bodyguards immediately returned fire or hesitated. What is documented is this: Weiss was killed by security seconds later. Containment was immediate. Long clutched his abdomen. He remained conscious briefly. Guards sealed the corridor. Lawmakers fled the chamber. The building fell silent. Doctors transported Long to Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. Surgeons operated for hours, attempting to repair internal damage. Official reports confirmed complications from internal bleeding developed over the next days. Hope diminished quickly. On September 10th, his condition collapsed. Breathing became labored. Family stood nearby. Physicians conferred quietly. He stopped responding. He was 42 years old. Authorities determined Weiss acted alone, possibly motivated by political grievances involving his father-in-law, Judge Benjamin Pavey. Accounts vary on whether Weiss intended assassination or confrontation. That uncertainty persisted. One aide later said he felt shock. Long had used armed state police to control opponents. Now armed guards surrounded his body. His remains were displayed beneath the Capitol dome before burial on the grounds. Tens of thousands attended the funeral. Political allies secured control of Louisiana's government in the immediate aftermath. National observers speculated about a disrupted presidential campaign. The Capitol shooting ended his rise. His grave remains beneath the tower.